A cowboy movie set in space. That's Star Wars. It's old-fashioned, escapist entertainment, pure and simple, with no moral, no message. And it appears this is what just about everybody in the country is in the mood for.
After the success of Star Wars, every TV network producer wanted to find a way to cash in on the success and find a way to bring an epic space adventure to the small screen. Legendary producer Glenn Larson, who had already had success with TV shows such as Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew, pitched a plan to Universal and ABC to bring a space epic to the small screen.
Fall Guy is a Glenn Larson production.
The show would follow the adventures of a starship as it journeyed across the galaxies, transporting human survivors from Earth as they are chased by robotic soldiers called Cylon. The only issue with ABC was how could they do this on a TV show budget? Star Wars had created a new standard in science fiction effects. Anything cheaper would come off as corny and be seen as a joke. However, Larson promised ABC and Universal that he could do the television show for only $7 million. That was $40 million less than the budget of Star Wars. ABC agreed, and work started on an hour-and-a-half pilot episode, Battlestar Galactica, Saga of a Star World. In late fall of 1977, production started on the pilot episode, and Larson knew who he needed to pull this off, the people that helped pull off Star Wars. Larson hired concept artist Ralph McQuarrie and Industrial Light and Magic's co-founder John Drexton, who had a falling out with George Lucas during the making of Star Wars. Universal sent a 500-page draft of the show's plans titled Galactica, Saga of a Star World to George Lucas's office. According to Ralph McQuarrie, Lucas wasn't happy at all. The show was a problem for George because they had an emperor, their versions of the stormtroopers, rocket fighters. They had a lot of things that fit into Star Wars, and it was clear it was a Star Wars ripoff, McQuarrie told J.W. Risen in his book, The Making of Star Wars. Former Lucas employee John Drexton admitted in the 1983 book, Skywalking, The Life and Films of George Lucas, that he used many of the same effects on Battlestar Galactica that he used when making Star Wars, and he felt guilty about that. Lucasfilm and 20th Century Fox were not happy with what they read in the 500-page draft of what was being filmed over at the Universal Studios lot. Dirk Benedict was cast as a roguish space pilot. The Cylon stormtrooper-like soldiers, dogfight battles in space. This wasn't someone trying to ride the coattails of Star Wars. To George Lucas and 20th Century Fox, this was someone trying to rip off Star Wars. In June of 1978, 3 months before the premiere of the pilot episode, Lucas and 20th Century Fox filed a lawsuit against ABC and Universal. People felt something like Battlestar Galactica was a television version of Star Wars. It was the same thing, and they tried to sell it like it was the same thing, as if I had made it. Not only does it upset me because I didn't think the quality was very good, but it also upset me because if I wanted to do a TV series of Star Wars, I couldn't. They had already spoiled the television market. Lucas explained in the book Making of The Empire Strikes Back. To show that they had a case that Larson was ripping off Star Wars, 20th Century Fox came up with similarities between Battlestar Galactica and Star Wars. Out of the 34 similarities, some seemed like real issues, while others just seemed like it was a reach to say they took from Star Wars, such as they both centered around conflict of a war. As the lawsuit battled its way to the courts, ABC premiered the pilot episode of Battlestar Galactica on September 17, 1978. The show was a ratings success. Larson also took notes from the Lucas playbook and reached out to toy companies, comic book publishers, anyone willing to spend money for the rights to sell Battlestar Galactica merchandise. Larson, Universal, and ABC believed they successfully brought Star Wars to the small screen. However, after the pilot episode, ABC saw a steady drop in viewers as the season went on. Not only was the show dropping in viewers, as the season continued, the budget started to shrink as well, and the look of Star Wars on the small screen was starting to disappear. After 24 episodes, ABC pulled the plug on Battlestar Galactica. However, they were still having to battle George Lucas and 20th Century Fox in the courtroom. In 1980, a California district court dismissed the claim filed by 20th Century Fox and Lucasfilm. The two parties appealed the dismissal even if ABC had already canceled the show. The lawsuit would keep going until 1983 when the United States Court of Appeals Ninth Circuit reversed the lower court's decision ordering the lawsuit to trial. Lucas or Larson would never step into the courtroom as both parties would reach an agreement out of court. At the same time in 1983, both creators would step away from their science fiction fantasies and focus on other things. But nothing stays dead forever, as Star Wars would return in the mid-90s with the re-release of the original films and the start of the Star Wars prequels in 1999. And Larson handed Battlestar Galactica over to Ronald D. Moore, who rebooted and retooled Battlestar Galactica into a much darker, grittier, and much more popular series. The two franchises had gone their separate ways, and now it looks like Star Wars is aiming for the small screen with plans for at least 2 live-action television shows on Disney Plus streaming service, and Battlestar Galactica plans to head to the big screen. In 1978, Hong Kong toy company Argo decided they would jump on the Star Wars craze and try to get Star Wars-like action figures to the toy shelf before Kenner could. These figures didn't really look like the action figures we're used to with Star Wars, but they did kind of look like they were based on characters from Star Wars, a little bit. These figures mostly showed up at stores like Kmart and nickel and dime stores, which today you kids probably call dollar stores. But they also showed up in an exclusive package for Woolworths.
Like inflation never happened at Woolworth now.
Again, these figures didn't really look like Kenner Star Wars action figures. They looked more like the Playmobil action figures than Star Wars action figures. They looked cheap and they were cheap. But that's how they were able to get onto the market a few months before Kenner's Star Wars line. As the Arco stockholders popped champagne bottles, and stores were happy to have something Star Wars kind of related on the toy shelves, not everyone was happy. Who wasn't happy? You guessed it, Mr. George Lucas, Lucasfilms, 20th Century Fox, and Kenner. They all came together to sue the toy company to get the toys out of the toy stores. And they asked for $1 million in damages.
$1 million.
In June 1978, federal court judge Irving Hill ruled that Arco must stop making Space War action figures because it went against a copyright deal between 20th Century Fox and Kenner, or General Mills at the time. 20th Century Fox and Kenner also said that they lost sales due to these other Star Wars action figures and asked for $1 million. However, the judge ruled that would be decided later if Lucasfilm, 20th Century Fox, wanted to bring that up later. I can't find any information that any of the companies went forward with that lawsuit to get the $1 million. Most of the time, if you were sued for trying to rip off Star Wars, once they got the toy or item pulled from the store, Lucasfilm, Fox, and Kenner kind of left you alone, and I believe that's what they did here. The figures were taken out of the stores, and the company ceased production.
And stay out of the Woolworth.
So let's look at these first Star Wars action figures, and even some that didn't get released. First up, we had R2-D2. It comes with a lightsaber, a space sword, a space gun, a TV walkie-talkie, a mechanical arm, and a TV camera. Not really sure, but I guess it was cheap to make. As you can see here, it doesn't really look that much like R2-D2, but you can kind of see that that's what they were going for. Let's look at Chewbacca. Chewbacca came with a space gun, a TV walkie-talkie, a mechanical arm, and a space pack. What's the difference between a regular backpack and a space pack? Can't really tell you. I guess it's to hold your asteroids in. Oh, anyway. Okay, that's Chewbacca, and it looks a little bit like Chewbacca, but you got to really kind of squint your eyes to make it look like Chewbacca. So let's talk about the Stormtrooper. This one here came with the TV camera, another TV walkie-talkie, and that arm thing, and that same space gun. So we have the Stormtrooper ripoff. Again, you can kind of see what they're going for, but it doesn't really look that much like a Stormtrooper. So let's look at one of the other droids, C-3PO. And what does he come with? That TV thing, a space gun, an arm, and that walkie-talkie. Oh, excuse me, the TV walkie-talkie. So we got the lovable droids, but who else did we get? You guessed it, Darth Vader. Now, I haven't given names to any of these figures because these figures didn't have names. Nowhere on the package did it say Darth Vader or some name that sounded like Darth Vader, like Garth Vader, or anything that sounded like Darth Vader. No, they didn't have any names on them. But let's take a closer look at the would-be Darth Vader. We can see here Darth Vader comes with a lightsaber, a space sword, a space gun, the mechanical arm thing, and this time something different, a shield! And to round off the figures, we got two different Luke Skywalkers. Some of you might be saying, hey, maybe it's Han Solo, but the figures are basically the same, and you can kind of tell that we're going for a Luke Skywalker look. Let's look at the first Luke Skywalker. This one came with, you guessed it, a TV walkie-talkie, that gun, that arm, that sword, and the same space pack. But like I said, there were two Luke Skywalkers, and this second Luke Skywalker actually has a name. Space Kid. What does Space Kid come with? Can you believe it? New stuff! He came with a helmet, a metal detector. That's right, a metal detector. A space gun, an oxygen tank, and a jet rover. As you can see from the picture, this one also looks nothing like Luke Skywalker. Now, let's talk about what didn't get released, and that was a gift set of 3 action figures. In this set, we have the Chewbacca figure, the Stormtrooper, and C-3PO. Again, this 3-pack was never released. Not only did you have these action figures, you had playsets for them. Well, playsets is kind of using the term loosely. Let's look at the playset. The Space Wars Galaxy Control Room came with 33 pieces. Looks like it came with 33 pieces of junk if you ask me. As you can see here, there wasn't much of a playset here, except a couple of figures and some little pieces. And it looks like nothing from the Star Wars movies. But they also released games, so let's take a look at some of the games. There was a Space War toy game, released in either blue or red gun. And the blue gun was sold in 2 different packages. One with it angled, and the other it wasn't. The guns came with a metal target. On a side note, between 1976 and 1979, Argo's dart gun would always appear on the top 10 most dangerous toy list for kids. The gun was also released without the metal target. Also released a sparkling space pistol that came with sparkling action. And that's a look at the toy guns. So let's look at the games they made under the brand Space War. First up, the Light Up Target game. Man, I don't know about you, but that's a great name for a game. I wonder how they came up with that. This came with a gun, 3 darts, a game board, and had 5 light-up spaceship targets, an automatic reset button. Yes, an automatic reset button. And a scorekeeper. And the scorekeeper is just a little piece of plastic you slide up and down. The other game was yet another gun game. These guys really love their dart guns. This came with a spring target, moving knockdown targets, 4 safety darts. Safety darts, right. And a wind-up key motor. Wow, a key motor, kids.
Are we having fun yet?
Looking at these toys, I have to wonder if the judge was in the pocket of 20th Century Fox or Kenner, because they really don't look like Star Wars toys. Now you can argue that the Stormtrooper figure or maybe the Chewbacca looks a little like them. I don't think it looks enough like them to get them pulled from toy shelves and to end up in court. If you ask me, and just my opinion, Arco got screwed.
And finally this evening, if you don't know what a 100-year-old Wookiee is, he or it is seen here on the left, chances are you're going to find out. Douglas Kiker reports.
In the late 1970s, space fantasy films were in high demand thanks to the success of Star Wars. So when Hollywood stuntman Dean Preston finished his movie script, Space Pets, he knew there was only one person that he wanted to read it, George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars. He quickly, with the help of a friend, did some rewrites to polish up the script, and then his friend dropped it off in the mail to send off to George Lucas in 1978. Dean waited and heard nothing back from George Lucas or Lucasfilm Limited, so he went on with his life. As Dean fell into his role as a television assistant, George Lucas was hard at work making the sequel to the biggest movie of all times.
The sequel to Star Wars is here. It's called The Empire Strikes Back, and George Lucas has the story.
The Empire Strikes Back premiered in May 1980. and was without a doubt a huge success like the original film. This proved that Star Wars was not just a fluke. The sequel's success helped Star Wars become the pop icon it is today. A few short years later in 1982, Dean Preston had moved on with his dreams of making his own space fantasy film and was sitting in traffic on a highway in Northern California. Sitting there looking at the car in front of him, he noticed something that made little sense to anyone else. There in front of him was a car with a vanity license plate that read Ewok. That was a word he knew well, a word that he made up for a furry little bear creature in his script, Space Pets. Shocked, Dean had to find out who the driver of the car was and why he chose that name for his license plate. He followed the car until the driver noticed and pulled over. He waited in the car to see who would exit. Finally, the driver stepped out of the car along with the passenger. He was a little taken back as two dwarfs exited the car and walked over to him. Dean asked him about the license plate and how they came up with the word Ewok. The driver told Dean that they both had just finished working on the next Star Wars movie where they both played a teddy bear-like alien creature called Ewoks. Dean would later tell a Canadian courtroom that he felt a funny feeling in the bottom of his stomach, and he knew without a doubt that his script had reached George Lucas, and he used the name that Dean came up with, a play on the word he walks, Ewoks. And he even used his creation of a teddy bear race of aliens. Dean quickly contacted his lawyer, and the fight to get the credit as the creator of the Ewoks started. One big happy family. First, his lawyer contacted Lucasfilm Limited, who denied Lucas ever read Dean's script. The battle took 7 years, but in 1980, Dean would finally be able to tell his story in a courtroom in front of George Lucas himself. In court, Lucasfilm lawyer and staff testified no script sent to them was ever given to George Lucas, as they would not allow George Lucas to read any unsolicited manuscript because doing so could lead to major legal problems such as this. Lucasfilm employee Jane Bai testified she opened every piece of mail addressed to Lucas to protect him, and secretary Betty Alsop testified she would return unsolicited manuscripts back to the sender unread. Star Wars illustrator and storyboard artist Joe Johnston told the courtroom that he helped design the Ewoks. He said that in 1980, George Lucas described to him his plans for a small teddy bear warriors, but never used the term Ewok. Lucas told him that he wanted them to be small, furry, and clear they were the good guys.
The Ewoks add their touch of magic.
Dean's friend David Hurry took the stand to testify that he edited and helped polish up Dean's script Space Pets in 1978, and he was the one that mailed it to George Lucas that same year. Dean would also take the stand to testify that he was the one that came up with the name Ewoks, and he came up with how the teddy bear native alien race would look like. Then it was time for the man himself, George Lucas, to take the stand.
The defense calls George Lucas.
George Lucas!
Lucas testified that his Ewok and the ones created by Dean are similar only in a gross sense. They both have fur, they both walk on 2 feet, and they both are an alien race that lived in a forest. Other than that, and the name, there was nothing else the same. When it came to the name Ewoks, George Lucas said that he created hundreds of names, and doing so mostly by just playing with words. Lucas testified that his first plan was to have the forest natives be Wookiees like Chewbacca, but once he had Chewbacca know how to fly the Falcon, he knew Wookiees wouldn't be a good plan. So he made the Wookiee smaller, with shorter fur and larger eyes. He told the courtroom that the name Ewok was a play on the word Miwoks, the name of a California Indian tribe that once lived on the grounds where Skywalker Ranch sits today. As for the word Wookiee, Lucas told the courtroom that he made it up out of thin air. But over cross-examination, he admitted that the name came from disc jockey Terry McGovern, as he flubbed a line doing AR work for Lucas's THX 1138. That flub line was, and Lucas liked the sound of that so much, he used it for Star Wars. Finally, Lucas had his say, and Dean had his, and it was up for the courts to decide. After a few days, the court ruled in favor of George Lucas and Lucasfilm. Leaving the courtroom, Lucas had little to say to reporters but he did tell them that being sued was the price you paid for having a hit movie. And he added there were no lawsuits after Howard the Duck. Dean, who was suing for $125 million in damages, was ordered to pay the legal fees for Lucas, his lawyers, 20th Century Fox, and Lucasfilm. In an interview 15 years after the trial, Dean said the whole thing is now a terrible memory for him, that it affected his life dramatically, and that many of his business plans were ruined and people walked away from him. And that's the feud between two Ewok creators. Born Luther Campbell, the South Florida rapper was also known to many of his fans as Luke Skywalker, a name Luther said he took from New York Knicks player Kenny Walker, who would often be called Kenny Sky Walker.
And the fans as well, and Kenny Skywalker living up to his nickname, and it's going to be an...
Luther was already going by the nickname Luke, so for him, this was a fitting stage name. However, to avoid any legal issues using the name Skywalker, Luther added an extra Y in the Skywalker name. Campbell became very known around Miami Beach as Luke Skywalker, and his group, Two Live Crew, grew more popular. In 1986, Campbell started up his own record label, naming it after his stage name, calling it Luke Skywalker Records. Again, with two Y's to avoid any copyright issues.
Black, green, purple, Jew, you have the right to listen to whoever you want to, and even the Two Live Crew, Two Live Crew, Two Live Crew.
As the 80s came to a close, Two Live Crew's fan base was growing way beyond South Florida, as their Move Something was certified gold and reached number 20 on the Billboard's top R&B hip-hop charts. But it was 1989's As Nasty As They Wanna Be that caused the group to be known outside their field of music, as their harsh, dirty lyrics upset many outside the world of hip-hop.
Sitting at home with my dick hard, so I got the black book for a freak to call. Picked up the telephone, then dialed the 7 digits, said, yo, this Marquise, baby, are you down with it?
The U.S. District Court of Florida ruled that the album was legally obscene, being the first ever album to be deemed legally obscene. Two Live Crew was becoming the face of the current rap scene, but also the face of free speech. As they appealed the verdict to the 11th Circuit, Luther Campbell, under the stage name Luke Skywalker, was starting to become very well known, and it wasn't the clean-cut image of Luke Skywalker from Star Wars.
Two Live Crew went on trial in Fort Lauderdale, Florida on Tuesday, charged with singing obscene songs for paying adults during a nightclub performance last June.
The group and Luther would become infamous for dirty, nasty lyrics. In 1990, they released their album Banned in the USA. This was mostly a solo album, as Two Live Crew members was almost pushed to the background, as the label on the album said it was featuring Two Live Crew. Luther's fame was getting attention from everyone, not just music lovers, but talk show hosts, news reporters, and George Lucas, who wasn't at all thrilled that the rapper was using the stage name Luke Skywalker. Lucas brought a lawsuit against Luther Campbell and asked for a temporary restraining order forbidding the name Luke Skywalker, pending the outcome of a trial and asking for $200 million in damages. U.S. District Judge James Adelman agreed and ordered for Luther Campbell to stop using the name, saying it could damage the image of the Star Wars namesake, stating that George Lucas was the owner of the trademark of the young, clean-cut hero in Star Wars named Luke Skywalker. He ruled that by using the name, Campbell created, or would continue to create, a likelihood of confusing with George Lucas's trademark. Lucas's lawyer, Charles Shepard, said they were excited by the ruling and felt they were on legal solid ground. Campbell was also banned from using the name Luke Skywalker Records or any branding or logos with the name Skywalker. Campbell said this was just a momentary setback, as he believed there was no legal grounds for the lawsuit. 2 months later, George Lucas's attorney filed a contest proceeding against Campbell, stating that he went against the judge's ruling by wearing a t-shirt with the name Skywalker and the logo on stage. They also said Campbell kept selling records bearing the logo and name Skywalker Records, Also at this time, he was seen on television being arrested and in handcuffs while wearing the Skywalker logo shirt. 2 months later, Luther Campbell and George Lucas reached an out-of-court agreement. Luther Campbell would quit using the name Luke Skywalker and the logo and pay George Lucas $300,000, ending the $300 million lawsuit for federal trademark infringement. This agreement also got Campbell off the hook for the contempt charges for wearing the Skywalker shirt after being barred. Campbell would change the name of his record label from Skywalker Records to Luke Records. The two parties went their separate ways, and neither really talked publicly about the lawsuit or the agreement. However, in 2015, on the eve of the release of Star Wars The Force Awakens, Campbell still seemed a little bitter about the whole thing, telling Billboard magazine that he was ready to fight it in court and believes that he could have won, but fearing that it would drag for years in court, he decided to settle. With the new Star Wars movie, Campbell banned his kids from seeing it, telling them if they want to see The Force Awakens, they can buy a bootleg copy. Campbell does say he respects the fact that people love the movie so much, but maybe there's more to his boycotting The Force Awakens than a lawsuit. Luther Campbell admits he's a Star Trek fan, and he told Billboard magazine, "If you're a Trekkie, you damn sure don't love Star Wars."
Most illogical reaction.
What does singer-songwriter Neil Young have to do with Star Wars? Well, in 1978, in the height of Star Wars fever, Neil Young took his Rust Never Sleeps tour on the road. However, he did not go alone. Along with Neil Young was his road crew, the guys that would come out between songs, moving drums and equipment around, and help settle the stage before the show. Normally at concerts, especially in the late 70s, these were overworked, overweight crew members, or roadies. But Neil Young did something a little different for this tour. As the house started to play Jimi Hendrix's Star Spangled Banner, out came the road crew. However, instead of wearing tour t-shirts of the time, the roadies was dressed as Jawas. Yes, Jawas. Sure, they were human-sized Jawas, but they were accompanied with oversized concert crates to give them the appearance of being smaller. They hit the stage dragging a 10-foot tall cardboard cutout of a 1926 microphone. But the overgrown Jawas were not alone on stage. There were also some mini Jawas, or technically, normal-sized Jawas. Many people believe that these smaller Jawas were performed by Neil Young's children. As the microphone was raised on stage, the crowd went wild. Another crate lifted to reveal Neil Young. The crowd loved it, and every time the Jawas appeared on stage, the crowd went wild. But were these Jawas, or was the world just so obsessed with Star Wars fever that they saw Star Wars wherever they went? Neil Young himself never referred to them as Jawas. He only referred to them as road eyes. According to Neil Young, the tour, Rust Never Sleeps, was given to him by Mike Mothersbaugh from Devo, who got the slogan from a jug of paint. Neil Young says the phrase was an aphorism of his self-renewal to avert the threat of irrelevance. And he said the Jawas, or road eyes, represented that. Whatever the reason was, the crowd loved it. But one person didn't. George Lucas. George Lucas threatened legal action for the unlicensed use of his characters. However, everything was settled out of court, and soon the Jawas disappeared. However, you can still find this on the DVD of Neil Young's concert from that tour. A few years later, in 1982, Lucasfilm and Marvel Comics would poke a little fun at this with the monthly comic book series The Empire Strikes Back in issue 156. That issue was about scrapyard droids and Jawas, with the title, Rust Never Sleeps. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this first episode of Tales from Star Wars Land, when Star Wars and pop culture collides, and I hope you learned a little thing that you didn't know about Star Wars.
Super baddie Darth Vader up to no good at all, again in The Empire Strikes Back. David Prowse, how did a West Country boy get to be one of the nastiest men in the galaxy?
It's amazing, isn't it? I was sat at home one day and I got a phone call from my agent saying, can I go and see George Lucas?
In 1976, bodybuilder actor David Prowse turned down the role of Han Solo's best friend, Chewbacca.
Tell me what they are. And he said, well, the first part's a part of a character called Chewbacca. I said, what in the hell's Chewbacca? And he said, it was like a furry type gorilla that goes through the film on the side of the goodies. And I thought, I turned my nose up. I thought, well, I don't fancy 3 months in a gorilla skin. I said, what's the other one? And he said, well, the other one's the big villain of the film. I said, say no more, George, I'll take it. And he said, well, you would never regret this decision. And this is the result.
It was a role of a lifetime. But the downside? David learned that his face would not be seen. Oh well, he thought. People will still love hating the man behind the mask. And who knows, maybe one day, if the movie is a huge success, there will be sequels. Maybe, just maybe, the evil Darth Vader will remove his mask and the world can finally see the real face of Darth Vader, David Prowse. And if that doesn't happen, well, at least they get to hear David Prowse as Darth Vader.
Start tearing this ship apart piece by piece until you find those tapes. Find the passengers of this vessel. I want them alive.
The attendance at Star Wars has been almost astronomical. Queues are still forming. In America, more money was taken at box offices in 1 week than for the prestigious Jaws. In London, after a month, almost 600,000 flocked to see the film, an all-time record.
In 1977, David Prowse and the stars of Star Wars hit the premiere of the film. As the lights dimmed down, the film producers, actors, crew, movie critics, and David Prowse found themselves pulled into a new world as the belly of a Star Destroyer flies overhead. However, as the story took viewers inside the battleship, pulling the viewers into the story even more, David Prowse was saddened when Vader entered the film.
Where are those transmissions you intercepted? What have you done with those plans?
He heard for the first time the lines of Darth Vader. But something wasn't right. Something wasn't right at all, and only David Prowse knew what it was. The evil, hard-toned voice coming from the mask of Darth Vader was not his.
Give a pardon until you found those plans and bring me the passengers. I want them alive!
I think the problem was, as you obviously realise, I have a West Country accent.
Oh, I wouldn't say that.
very, very slight, very slight. And I don't think they could do Darth Vader with an English accent. That was the big problem. And also, you see, the character being a big black character that he is, I think George really wanted an obvious black voice, and they got James Earl Jones in to do it. And to me, that is a very obvious Negro voice. And anyway, it's a nice combination, I think.
So Vader lost his voice. At least the voice of David Prowse. However, he still had hope that one day he would be seen as the man behind the mask. As he says, this was promised to him by George Lucas himself. So in 1977, Star Wars tore up the box office and made everyone in it, but David Prowse, a household name. Every kid on the playground in 1977 could tell you who played Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Han Solo, even C-3PO. But almost none could tell you who played Darth Vader. But with the success of Star Wars, David wasn't worried. He knew there would be a Star Wars 2, and maybe then, just maybe, the fans would get to see the man behind the mask. This is where things between Lucasfilm, George Lucas, and David Prowse seem to get a little off the rails, and even a little confusing. During a convention in 1978, 2 years before Empire Strikes Back, David was asked about the upcoming Star Wars 2. He gave little details, but said filming would start in February, but would not be released until May of 1980. But he did promise the crowd that soon after Star Wars 2, filming for Star Wars 3 would start. So what was the story of this sequel? Well, according to a reporter that was there at the convention, David talked about a huge fight scene between Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker. During the fight, we learned the truth of who Luke's father is. It's Darth Vader. Father can't kill son. Son can't kill father. David Prowse is quoted as saying, "Did David just reveal the greatest twist in movie history?" That again is where things get foggy. Did David know? Or did he just make a lucky guess? This seems unlikely that David knew the twist, as the first script to Empire Strikes Back was done in early 1978. That screenplay was scrapped by Lucas, who wasn't happy with it. The twist of Vader being Darth Vader's father wasn't even in the first script, as it didn't appear until the second script written by Lucas. So it seems the whole plan of Vader being Luke Skywalker's father didn't come about until middle of 1978. The final draft of the script was done that April. Would David have known the twist as early as 1978? It seems that the major cast in the film was not even given the final pages to the script.
Only Lucas, Kirshner, and the film's producers knew the real story.
At the time, I knew that Mark had a father and that it was Darth Vader. But this was not in the script. There was a false page inserted. And I had the knowledge. The actors didn't even have it. No one had it. It was a total secret.
Even Mark Hamill himself didn't know the twist until moments before filming, when director Ivan Kushner pulled Mark Hamill to the side and revealed the twist.
They had taken me aside and said, "This is what he's really going to say."
And we're going to do the scene. And Darth Vader will be saying stuff that doesn't count. Forget it. Use your own rhythm compared to what he's doing.
As for James Earl Jones, he wasn't given the line until after filming, when they was dubbing in Darth Vader.
When I first saw the dialogue that said, "Luke, I am your father," I said to myself, he's lying.
So could David Prowse really have leaked this twist in 1978? Sounds to me like it was just a lucky guess. Maybe this is how Lucas came up with the twist.
The sequel to Star Wars is here. It's called The Empire Strikes Back, and George Lucas has the story.
In 1980, The Empire Strikes Back was released, and the revealing twist shocked the world, as it seemed the leak really didn't hurt the film. So that was done and gone, but the work for Star Wars 3 started, and once again, David Prowse would find himself in the headline of a spoiler leak.
Fans may have been a bit surprised when, at the climax of Return of the Jedi, Darth Vader's helmet was removed, revealing not the face of David Prowse, but of actor Sebastian Shaw.
According to David Prowse, while working out at a gym, he met with a reporter for The Void, who he thought was there to interview him about weightlifting. However, the questions turned to Star Wars, and the reporter asked him about a leak he had heard that Vader would die at the end of the film. This is where also David learned that an actor would be playing Darth Vader without the mask and not him.
I don't know why. They've never ever discussed it with me as to why I wasn't the dying Darth Vader. I think probably the reason was that they didn't want me to get into too strong a negotiating position for future movies. See, when in the film industry, there's no, when there's money involved, there's no love lost. Like, there's no loyalty. Yeah.
When the newspaper released the interview with David Prowse, the headline read, "Darth Vader to be killed off in next movie. Interview with David Prowse." And things changed from that day between David Prowse, Lucasfilm, and George Lucas. That ruined my association with Star Wars, David Prowse says. Lucas wouldn't even speak to me, he adds. The documentary I Am Your Father tracked down the reporter who confirmed David never told him about how the film would end. In fact, David was not even given a script, and the lines he was giving during the filming was not used. It seems clear that David Prowse wouldn't even know how the film was going to end.
The day we shot that, I thought, I wonder if Dave's going to know that this is being shot today. So just in case, I had a security guard on every door of the stage.
Okay, very quiet. Long take.
And action.
But the damage was already done, and David found himself blacklisted from day one after the story hit the press. He found he was needed less and less on the set of Return of the Jedi, and when he was on set, hardly anyone spoke to him. After the release of Return of the Jedi, and no new films in sight, Star Wars died down. But in 1999, with the release of Episode 1, David Prowse found himself back in the limelight, and it seemed, once again, in hot water with Lucasfilm. That same year, David Prowse and other cast and crew from Star Wars was asked to join the first official Star Wars convention, called Celebration. Over the next few years, David learned that Lucasfilm was not really happy at how David was signing his autograph.
And I thought, well, I'll put Dave Prowse is Darth Vader on my autographs, and they didn't like it very much. They said, would you mind putting as Dave Prowse as Darth Vader? I said no. I said I'll put Dave Prowse is, and it's continued on. I'd like to be able to cash in on this. Like I want people to know that it was me that did all the acting.
In 2010, he found he was banned from all official Star Wars conventions, an order given to Lucasfilm by George Lucas himself. He was even banned from Star Wars Weekend, something he loved doing for the kids at the Disney theme park. With Disney buying Lucasfilm, fans hoped we would see David Prowse once again at Celebration and on good terms with Star Wars. But David said he had no contact by anyone from Disney or Lucasfilm. In 2018, David Prowse, mostly for medical reasons, retired from making public appearances. So it seems the feud between David Prowse, George Lucas, Lucasfilm, and now Disney will never be resolved. As David said he was told, he just burned too many bridges over the years.
Hey, Junkman channel popping though.
Thank you, sir, for that unsolicited testimony.